Well, joining me now is National Senator Matt Canavan. Matt, welcome to the program. What did you make of the scenes we saw last night?
Well, look, I'm a little conflicted, I think, with the scenes. It's shocking to see such disorder, chaos and violent actions on our nation's streets. You don't like to see that. At the same time, it's about time. It's about time that the law was enforced. Perhaps if the law had been properly enforced more than 2 years ago when we first heard the horrific statements about Jews on our Sydney Opera House, we wouldn't have got to this stage. But when you give these type of actors, these activists, an inch, they run a mile, and we've been giving them many inches over the past few years as they've flaunted lawful orders, court orders, to not protest in certain areas. It was about time that the law was enforced. Now, because, as I say, it's taken so long for the law to be enforced, we've had to do so in a fairly confrontational fashion, and the scenes we see are extremely shocking for Australians. But as I say, we had to take action. I'm glad that finally, an Australian government has taken action. Like always, as you pointed out, the Prime Minister is playing catch-up here. He's seen the tough action that the New South Wales government has done and is sort of playing footsie with agreeing with it, but he's still not really quite there. He's saying he's only seemingly disagreeing with the protesters' conduct because it undermines their cause, not because it's against the law. That's the main point here, that people shouldn't break the law, and if they do, there are consequences.
Should Grace Tame be stripped of her Australian of the Year award?
I don't think we should do that. That will just make her a martyr. One of the problems I've seen emerge here in this place in Canberra is that quite often we seem to think that the mere sanction of a politician, even a law itself, will change conduct or behaviour. Often it has the opposite result. And so when the more we've tried to ban hate symbols, the more hate symbols I've seen on Australian streets. If we were to strip Grace Tame of this particular honorific, I think she'd just dine out on that. I don't see how that will help. I think the best thing to do here is to lock these people up who do break the law. If they break the law, lock them up, make them face the consequences, and then largely ignore them. That's the main thing. These people will go away when they're ignored. If you give them attention, if you respond to them, it'll just make the matter worse.
What did you make of the Australian National Imams Council slamming police for interrupting a Muslim prayer meeting? Spare me. What do you think of that?
Well, again, I come back to this basic principle. The law has to be upheld. In our culture, you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And it is not for priests or religious faiths to decide which laws they comply with and which laws they don't. We're a land of laws, and they must be enforced. And there are right and proper laws about the regulation of protests in this country. And particularly as a politician, I think any politician that is giving any succour or comfort to the protesters here breaking the law is a hypocrite, because you cannot walk into Parliament House and do the kind of things we saw the activists did on the streets of Sydney last night. So here in this building where I am now in Parliament House, there are very strong regulations about how you protest around here, and rightly so. They've got important business to do here in the Parliament. It shouldn't just be disrupted, whoever wants to march in and push the barrow of their choice. We have particular areas here around Parliament House you can go and protest. You need a licence for it. You need to get approval. That's all well and proper. So if that's the standards we apply here in our house, here in Parliament House, why shouldn't those same standards apply everywhere else in the country, particularly in our biggest city, where people have important business to do and need to get on with their lives? And we shouldn't have the Sydney Harbour Bridge shut down for these kind of protests. We shouldn't have the middle of Sydney completely disrupted with this chaotic, violent behaviour unnecessarily. The police did make and did request these protesters to protest in a dedicated area, I believe around Hyde Park, where they could have been safe, they could have made their point, and that's what needs to happen. The law just needs to be enforced.
Matt, the latest news poll has the coalition at just 18%, and your former boss, Malcolm Turnbull, reckons it's all the fault of Sky News. Have a listen.
This is the inevitable consequence for the Liberal Party of imagining that the goal of politics is to seek the approval of the Sky News audience. Now, that may well represent many of the members of their branches, but it does not represent Australia.
This from Malcolm Turnbull, who as leader of the Liberal Party imagined the goal of politics was to seek the approval of the ABC at every opportunity. But Matt, maybe he's right. Maybe it's all our fault.
I'm not sure if those aviators are rose-coloured there. There's certainly a tinge that accords with Malcolm's worldview. Look, I think all of these arguments about different forms of media, different ways of communicating, are tired, old-fashioned, and completely miss the point. The reason the Australian people are turning away from the major parties is because income levels are back to 2011 levels. The reason why we're not doing so well in the polls is that some of the policies we adopted have led to the biggest, some of the highest electricity prices in the world. The reason people have no trust in politicians is because their children and grandchildren can't afford to buy a home in one of the largest landmass countries in the world. They're the reasons people are turning away. So Malcolm, turn off Sky News. He's probably watching too much of it, probably not good for his blood pressure. Turn off Sky News and just go and talk to real people about their experiences. And that's why people are turning away from the tired, old-fashioned politics that Malcolm Turnbull represents. And our way back from this is to recognise that we have made mistakes, including Malcolm Turnbull made a lot of mistakes when he was Prime Minister. We got things wrong. And we need to reflect on that, change our attitude, and deliver again for the Australian people. That is the only way back. It's not about Sky News. It's not about the ABC, not about social media. It's about focusing on the needs and wants of the Australian people and putting those first.
I reckon Malcolm Turnbull could do with watching a little more of Sky News. Matt, one quick thing before you go. Sunday's press conference when David Littleproud and Susan Lee stood side by side to announce the coalition is back together. A pretty important moment. I thought the body language between Susan Lee and David Littleproud was pretty awkward. Here's Barnaby Joyce's take on it.
I saw the person who was apparently half the show standing there with a smirk on his face, without a tie, without a coat, basically carpeting the leader of the Liberal Party right in front of her face.
Do you agree David Littleproud didn't exactly put his best foot forward at that press conference?
Again, I just go back to focusing on the Australian people. And I think, with all respect, Barnaby has lost a bit of focus in recent weeks, where he's seemingly, his job at the moment seems to be running a commentary on the Liberal and National parties, not telling us what One Nation would do. I mean, he's the one out there saying he wants to be, or at least giving comfort to the suggestion that he's going to be Prime Minister in a One Nation government. Well, Barnaby, why don't you spend a bit more time telling us what you're going to do? Because last time he was that close to Prime Minister, he was Deputy Prime Minister, he signed up to net zero. Barnaby signed up to net zero. He's the reason why this country is in some of this mess. So maybe a little bit less focus on what other people are doing and a little bit more focus on what is the needs and wants of the Australian people, as I say.
Matt Canavan, appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for joining me.